say hi. I'm Isaiah Moliga-Puletasi. I'm a first-year student from San Francisco, and I'm a co-news editor on the Scarlet and Black.
And I am Henry Horn. I am a third-year staff writer from Pasadena, California with the Scarlet and Black. We are joined today with President Harris. We will be discussing the increase in threats to funding from the Trump administration to schools that value DEI, and we will be discussing the administration's response to those threats with President Harris. Isaiah, you want to lead us off?
Yeah. Okay, so just to kick us off, like Henry said, we've been seeing a crackdown on higher educational institutions for a variety of reasons: DEI, anti-Semitism. In your eyes, how have crackdowns affected Grinnell, whether directly or indirectly?
So I would say that what's happening in the whole sector of higher education has impacted everybody. So there's really a very different mood in the whole sector of higher ed of understanding what is coming from the federal government. I think greater understanding of what's happening at state governments as well, right? Because the issues that you raise happen in both scales of state and federal. So the very first thing I would say in terms of impact is we've all had to become students of all different kinds of documents, whether they are dear colleague letters, executive orders, proposed bills, bill processes, legislation, and so on and so forth. So the first impact, I think, is it's turned us into real students of the law and students of changes to the law as well, both simultaneously. I'm sure we'll get into some specifics, but that's the number one impact that I would cite. To give you an example of how that's impacted us in a very tangible way, for the first time, and it was thanks to Myrna Hernandez, Chief of Staff and VP of Administration, we took a team down to the Law and Higher Education Conference at Stetson University and really made a lot of contacts, a lot of really interesting realizations and things that we've brought back to campus since then.
Yeah, thank you.
Recently, we've seen a really kind of brazen attempt by the Trump administration to attack universities, and this is occurring at Harvard, where there's been a threat to cut their tax exemption under the guise of punishment for harboring pro-Palestine supporters. But Harvard's response has been, no, you're not going to do that to us. Princeton has signed on. Columbia, even though they initially relented, have also agreed with Harvard. What do you feel like that sets? Do you feel like that sets an example for other colleges? How do you feel like you can internalize that? How do you feel like that builds support for presidents to fight back against these threats?
That was a seismic moment, right? And I really recommend reading both the Trump administration's letter and the response, the letter from Harvard back to the Trump administration. You'll see there that the four freedoms of the university are often cited. University's independence are often cited. And what I would refer us all to there is Sweezy versus New Hampshire from 1957. This is a Supreme Court case that really establishes these four freedoms of the university: who can teach, what they can teach, the manner in which they teach, and who comes to the institution. So these are anchored deeply in this Supreme Court case. You add to that the First Amendment, freedom of speech, free expression, free inquiry, and you have a very solid basis for the kind of resistance that you're seeing from Harvard and that Grinnell has also been studying up on.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up on that with a hypothetical. And my hypothetical is, if Trump or the federal government were to ask Grinnell, hey, look, we want you to cut one of your academic programs or withholding some amount of funding from you, like, what is Grinnell doing in that situation?
So we've been doing a lot of scenario planning at Grinnell. We've got our campus forums on Wednesday at noon that deal with all different issues that are in the news right now: immigration, free expression, for example. And then we do some scenario planning based on what we learned on Wednesday kind of together. And to that particular question, of course, we would ask under what format or under what framework the administration would be asking that. Because as a private institution especially, we would be seeing that as government interference that would violate our First Amendment, our freedom of speech rights. And we do have some as an institution as well, let alone this famous case from 1957, Sweezy versus New Hampshire. So we would follow, and there are many ways for an administration to talk to a university, right? So there's the Dear Colleague letters. Those are very, very pointedly not law. They are interpretations of the law. And if you read the Dear Colleague letter from February 14th, footnote 3 is very explicit that this does not establish a new standard of law, nor does it have the effect of the law. So a Dear Colleague letter, however, says this is how this administration would like to interpret the law. So we read it, we read that one very, very carefully. There's OCR, so that's the Office of Civil Rights, which is in the Department of Education. Those are investigations that can be done for a college campus or to a college campus, in which you have to demonstrate that you are providing remedy to whatever the civil rights violation or civil rights complaint, rather, was. So my first question, if that statement were made, would be to say, under what auspices? Within what framework? Is this within the framework of OCR? Is this within the framework of a Dear Colleague letter? Is this the framework of an executive order? Executive orders also are not law, but they are understood to have the effect of the law. But as we're seeing, there are numerous, well over 100 lawsuits now, even against executive orders. So to get even more specific about, the first thing is to establish the framework. The second would be to establish the defense. And for something like the classroom and the academic program, it's First Amendment. And that is a very solid defense.
Yeah. So I guess, I don't know if you can say yes or no, but are any of Grinnell's academic programs at threat of being cut at all, pending Trump or the federal government saying you need to remove the program?
So you will seldom hear me say things absolutely, but I can say absolutely no. There are no programs that are going to be cut. We've spent a lot of time talking about academic freedom and academic expression. I do want to be explicit that academic freedom is both a protection and a boundary. We are protected and bounded by academic freedom. And what I mean by that is academic freedom ensures the classroom, it ensures the study, it ensures these 4 freedoms of the university that I would say have been sanctioned and preserved by Sweezy versus New Hampshire. And we have non-discrimination policies, and we have Title VI and Title IX and all these other state and federal laws. So I always like to push to an example. So for example, if there was a academic program that wanted to do white supremacist studies and bring in research that demonstrates that the white race is dominant and better than all other races, no. Because that would not be protected by academic freedom, because that would violate our non-discrimination policy. So I really am encouraged by where we are in our understanding of academic freedom. This is why I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I can say that you mentioned, your question to me was about existing programs. No, none of them are being cut in some kind of response or preparation to the threats to DEI.
Yeah.
Kind of going off of that, Forbes 2 days ago listed Grinnell as one of the 39 Trump-proof universities. Given our endowment size, endowment per student, what do you feel like that gives you? What security do you feel like that gives you in response to these threats? Do you feel like you are in a privileged position that you can say, we have the funds, we have a lot of support in the community, or do you feel like there is kind of like a target on your back because of that?
That's a great point. So we were also on another list of vulnerable colleges. That was 77 colleges who are vulnerable. So our great privilege is not only in the endowment that we have and the endowment per student that we have, it's also in our size and in the small reliance that we have on federal grants. So that shows up in 2 very important ways. One, our federal grants for research. So Grinnell just achieved Carnegie recognition as a research college, which is wonderful and rare. We spend $7 million on research at the institution. 2 of those millions are from the federal government. So the other 5 are from Grinnell College itself. So that's $2 million of federal grants for funding research compared to Harvard's $9 billion. So I actually did the math on this one. It's 0.02% of what Harvard's liability is when it comes to federal grants. So that's one really important distinction. We just have less vulnerability because we have less reliance on federal grants for research. The other one is quite wonderful. It was wonderful to kind of put the pieces together. We are a no-loan institution. So that means that we don't package financial aid in our financial aid packages for students, meaning that we're not reliant on federal financial aid within the financial aid that we provide. You can see the difference if you're relying on federal financial aid, all of a sudden that goes away. then you're left with millions of dollars that are not available. Now, the current administration has not yet said that they would take away student financial aid. You see what they're doing with federal research grants, but federal financial aid still remains active. There are slowdowns in FAFSA, however, because of DOGE cuts to personnel, and with some of the moves, including possibly student financial aid moving to the Small Business Administration, you're going to have a lot of bureaucratic upheaval that's really going to slow things down. We're going to be in a different position because we don't have student federal finance. Let me get the words in order. We're going to be in a different position because we don't have federal student loans in our own financial aid packages that we give to students. Hope that was clear. But those are two very important ways in which we don't have vulnerabilities that others may be enduring.
I guess opposite of vulnerabilities, how much support do you feel like you have within the federal government? There are, Iowa's senators, Iowa's representatives. Tom Cole from Oklahoma
Great research. Good.
is a Grinnell alum. What is your communication like with these representatives, with these senators? Do you feel like you have the support that you need, even across party lines? Do you think that you are getting what you need? Do you feel like you're getting your word across to those people?
This is what I love about Iowa, that it's a caucus state. And so I've had more access here, not in my role as president, but as a citizen of Iowa, more access to our elected representatives than I've had living anywhere else in the U.S. So a lot of politics is relationships, right? Long before the Trump administration, we've been, and I say now we, Grinnell College, have been establishing relationships with our elected representatives for decades. So the relationship with Senator Grassley is very strong. And I'm a member, of course, we're all members of the Iowa Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, which annually goes to the Hill and basically advocates for higher education, tries to tell Senator Grassley and other elected representatives about who we are, what our students are doing, what's our student loan debt, how are we moving college access forward, what are our student outcomes. We just give them information, we work with their aides, and then they come away, and usually there's a kind of case or a cause, so one year it was Pell Grants. We were really there to advocate for Pell Grants. So that's been important. The Greater Des Moines Partnership has also taken me to DC. And there, I would say the two that I would really cite, Senator Grassley, as I just did, whom we've hosted here on campus, along with Senator Ernst, and Representative Hinson. Representative Ashley Hinson, we are in her district, and she cares deeply about all her constituents. I've found her very responsive. So we've gone in together, and this is Monica Chavez Silva as well in the Community Partnerships Planning and Research. We've gone in with 17 different entities from the city of Grinnell and Grinnell College for the Build a Better Grinnell project that we've all done together. We've gotten a USDA grant for rural placemaking, but Representative Hinson has really been a crucial partner in all of that work. So I have found her very responsive. We've had good conversations about the community. I think she understands the economic impact that Grinnell College has, $207 million annually. That's all the visitors, all the events, all the things, students and so forth. So I think there's great understanding for the economic vitality and the academic mission that we're doing. And I will say too, there's a spectrum. There's politics and civics. And I'll pull to civics to say, here's how we're a good neighbor. Like we contributed to the new maternity wing, we contributed to the all accessible playground, just to keep showing that we're here as a member of this community. Of course, Renfro Hall is probably the biggest statement of that economic vitality and civic vitality engagement. So I will say that I have found the doors open, the calls are there. We're moving into understanding. That's the thing, because things are said, sometimes they're said in the media, then it's, my go-to is always, okay, but what's the document? Is it a Dear Colleague letter? Is it something that comes out of a particular bill process? Well, bills have processes. They get rewritten all along the way. Ask me about the Iowa funnel, right? That's a really big one too. It starts in January and it's currently ending now. And we can talk about state legislation as well. So because of past relationships, I would say we do have good access. We need to refine what we're asking for in terms of the considerations and so forth.
I want to zoom out or I don't want to say zoom out, but return back to this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion and kind of its importance at the college. And so we're seeing, again, returning to this idea of crackdown on higher ed, this crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion among the United States and among colleges here in Iowa. I'm curious, how is Grinnell working to preserve a value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and working to preserve that at the college?
Yeah. It's a great question. So by holding fast to our values is the short answer that needs a lot of explanation. What does that mean? So we have maintained the terminology because we think it's important, but we also want to keep exploring what it means, right? Diverse community is our second of three values. Educational excellence, diverse community, social responsibility. Those are the big three. It all goes back to the common good. I think there are lots of ways to translate diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I wrote to our state senators about some of the state legislation that was calling for the shutting down of DEI, I talked about DEI as basically being a good neighbor, right? Like, you always want to welcome different people into your midst. You want to treat them well, and you want to have them feel included. So I think once we dig deep into it, and this is where it gets really interesting, the accusations of DEI is that DEI is discriminatory, when in fact it was created to do the exact opposite, right? To fight discrimination and to make things more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive. So what we've done is we've looked, I can tell you the very straightforward litmus test that we ran on all of our DEI programming: open to all, required of none. And that is the most diverse, the most equitable, the most inclusive way that you can look at everything we're doing. So we have a very robust Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Their programming, the multicultural organizations, all the things, all of our cultural centers, all of our student orgs are by definition open to all, required of none, even if they're connected to a particular affinity. You can be interested in an identity or an affinity even if you're not of that identity and affinity. That's the whole point of college, is to learn things across difference. So that was the litmus test that we ran: open to all, required of none. And then we looked carefully. And if you look carefully at those executive orders, they decry illegal DEI, illegal discrimination. We can stand very solidly and say that we do not engage in illegal discrimination. I would cite to you a federal Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which actually, it gets a little convoluted, but in the end, it's very much in our favor. But this Court of Appeals ended up dismissing an injunction that DEI officers had wanted to bring to an executive order that would have shut down DEI. So they ended up backing the Trump administration, but on these terms. The Trump administration's executive order decried illegal DEI, illegal discrimination. And so the Court of Appeals agreed and said, absolutely, we don't want illegal discrimination or illegal DEI or illegal any kind of program, but DEI done in the name of creating opportunity, creating access, creating inclusion, is wonderful. And it goes through a whole list of how terrific DEI is, ending with, and what is more American than that? To provide opportunity, to provide access. It was a great day. So, and this is what we've really had to do, is say, wait a minute, this Court of Appeals actually sided with the Trump administration, but in the end it sided, actually, when you read the law, with exactly the position we would take, which is that our DEI is the opposite of discrimination. It seeks to redress discrimination. That's why we stand behind it.
Yeah. And I guess just to elaborate on that, when I think about diversity, I think about Grinnell's large international student body, and I think about the growing fears among a lot of international students at the college, regarding a lot of concerns at higher education institutions of, students being taken away or students being detained. I'm just kind of curious how the college is working to address those fears and working to support international students here at the college with getting here, being here, and staying here.
Right, all three, right? So here I have to sing the praises of Karen Edwards and her whole team in the Office for International Student Affairs, which is part of the Division of Student Affairs itself. And Karen Edwards has been doing this work for years and years. We've had a kind of first run in 2016 where there were concerns about visas and CVIS records, and of course it gets technical. And here you're exactly right. We're not in these very solid areas like the First Amendment and going back to 1957 and Sweezy versus New Hampshire. We are in ever-changing laws, right? Ever-changing, and the administration has much more discretion. The State Department has much more discretion here. We have taken a know your rights approach. That campus forum that we had just last week about immigration was by far the best attended that we had. We were just about full in HSSC auditorium. And so we're working on, in this particular way, it's know your rights as an individual, but also know your rights as a community, right? Understanding that people, if somebody from the federal government comes onto campus, we would say, you know, we need to call campus safety, because this is an interaction that needs to be mediated either by our attorneys or by campus safety. And so know your rights means also know your rights to what are the rights of a visa? What are the rights of a CVIS? What are the rights of the government to look at your social media within the CVIS record and so forth? So that's been really important. A lot of one-on-one work is what's been happening, a whole lot of one-on-one work. And you may know, I did sign, and of course, every time I do anything, I do it with the board support, with the understanding and scrutiny and deliberation of the leadership team and so on. But we did sign an amicus brief with the President's Alliance for Immigration and Higher Education, which seeks to get clarity and even pause on a lot of these visa revocations and things like that are happening. We've always helped students obtain their visas, just made that process as clear as possible. Of course, we're talking about embassies in other parts of the world. It gets very complex, the kaleidoscope of Grinnell students coming together. But we've had some really great early wins. Some of our students who have deposited for this fall have already gotten their visas and so forth. So we're working case by case as it evolves, but we're also understanding that, I really want to emphasize this point, it is not the same constitutional solid ground. It's much more regulation working out of the State Department. And there you've got a lot of expertise and a lot of recourse to ask for clarity and process.
Yeah, thank you.
Good time. I think we're done. On behalf
good.
of Isaiah, myself, Scarlet and Black, the Grinnell
that
community.
happened so quickly.
Thank you so much, President Harris.
Thank you.
It's been great, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great questions. Thank you so much.
So